Susan cracked the egg against the mixing bowl's rim so hard shards pierced her palm. Blood swirled into the yolk, creating an abstract pattern like that painting Robert bought at the church bazaar. For the tax deduction, he'd grunted. She should have stopped to rinse the cut, but her arthritis-crippled fingers had long learned to work through pain. With jerky movements, she folded in flour, sour cream, and unmeasured salt she'd abandoned years ago after some PBS doctor's warning. The dough turned stubborn, but she relished how her wrist tendons flexed rhythmically, proof her body still fought. The fridge groaned louder than usual, protesting its 13th cake this week. Tupperware graves of uneaten desserts lined the shelves like ashes waiting for a memorial that had never come. The blackberry layer cake had developed a crust as weathered as Susan's face after Robert's passing. She leaned her forehead against the chilled door, inhaling wilted cabbage bought for unrealized soups. The phone startled her mid-wipe. The rag swirled countertop rings resembling oak tree growth circles. 10 missed calls from Carla glared on screen. Her daughter called every third day at 11:07 sharp. The minute Robert's heart monitor flatlined, their mismatched grieving schedules clashing. Susan smeared a damp finger across the fridge photo, that awkward graduation shot where their son still smiled before stealing from her purse. "Hi, Mom," Carla's voice crackled like a warped vinyl left in Grandma's attic. "Baking again? I can hear your mixer through the phone." Susan blindly hit the stand mixer's button, drowning the rest in mechanical whirring. The dropped spoon clattered loud enough to rouse Margot, their ancient tabby, sunning herself on the sill. "Did you check the silverware? Bill and I were thinking, for safekeeping. Jake called from rehab again last night." The kitchen fell silent enough to hear the apple crisp crackling in the oven. Susan tracked Dawn Light crawling across her Queen of the Kitchen apron, Robert's 20th anniversary gift chosen solely for its Kohl's clearance tag. "He asked for money," Carla paused, offering imaginary space for tears. "We agreed you should cut him off. Cookies won't fix this, Mom. Maybe stay with us a while?" Susan bit her cheek until copper bloomed. Outside, the neighbor's mutt dug beneath the maple where she and Robert planned grandkids' swings that never materialized. Rain peppered the porch table where they'd once pitched a tent during Hurricane Gloria, howling laughter over wind's scream. "I need to withdraw savings," blurted Susan before thought caught up. Her ear rang the way it did when lying to Robert about book club costs. A lighter clicked over the line. Carla had quit smoking 3 Thanksgivings back. "Who eats all these pies anyway? You'll get diabetes." The notion of converting grief into calories for soup kitchen drunks suddenly shamed her. Flour-caked arms revealed arthritis splotches mapping unexplored countries. The microwave clock blinked 11:11. She always imagined Robert winking then from some parallel life. Her hand reached automatically for the heart-shaped pan, last gift from their son, bought with $20 from her wallet. "Carla, darling, this is my rebellious phase." Susan adjusted fake peonies Robert hated for their chemical stench. Joining one of those reality shows, widows baking through grief. Think Grey Panthers meets Food Network. Static cackles mirrored childhood laughter after family blowouts. The shortbread dough under her hand suddenly felt like Play-Doh squished with granddaughter Emily during their last strained visit. "Mom, you hid in the closet during your own surprise 65th. The closet still reeked of mothballs and stage fright. Susan imagined crawling into Robert's old suits, still holding his posture. Instead, her hand drifted toward the junk drawer housing letters from Cold Creek Farm. 5 acres priced at her home equity share after 3 bus trips and consultations with that widower realtor. "Don't laugh, but I bought a drive-in theater in Bozeman," she whispered, like Robert might hear from the bedroom where his scratched reading glasses still rested. Carla snorted cough laughter. "If true, I demand premiere rights, with your candied pumpkin seeds instead of popcorn." Susan watched an ant haul crumbs across the Robert engraved cutting board. His joke about wanting his name to greet him if dementia struck. That first widowhood month, she'd only sliced his favorite fig bread here. "The tax notice came, right?" Carla's tone turned hunter sharp. "About the inheritance?" Burnt cinnamon wafted from the oven. Susan kicked the wastebasket, spewing realtor buyout letters. She pictured Carla on the doorstep with U-Hauls, picking at doorframe cracks with manicured nails. Made me late for Bible study. Susan swept flour into figure eights like she'd traced on Robert's back during sunset slow dances. Pastor Mike warned about women hiding sins in charity bake sales. Silence spanned 3 heartbeats. Margot knocked over the basil pot whose scent Robert compared to dime store perfume. Jake's money's already gone. Susan eyed the Colorado postcard, shouting, "Goats, the new Labradors. Maybe buys harmonica lessons. Bill could use new hobbies." Grabbing the bare-stitched oven mitt from their 5th anniversary, she yanked the oven door. The charred pie evoked her recent dreams. Loneliness scented like wildfire. "Mom, we agreed about joint accounts." Carla stalled. Somewhere in Denver, wind chimes twin to theirs, pawned by Jake for whiskey, rang. Susan plunged a finger into molten filling, pain radiating through tremor. Maybe tomorrow she'd move yeast to Robert's unreachable shelf. The film crew arrives Monday. She winked at fridge shadows resembling a stranger's shoulders. Needed some sassy granny vibe, drafting outfits, bedazzled jeans with potholder capes. Laughter dissolved into smoker's cough. Enough jokes. Text pie pics and check carbon monoxide detector. Read an article. Susan studied the pie's ECG-like cracks mirroring Robert's final monitor while she'd argued morphine doses. She palmed the blistering crust until pain clarified everything. "Tell Jake his brownies are freezing." The gas burner's click cut off replies. Blue flames licked the kettle boiled daily for 40 years. Post-call, Susan sank by the dog bed unused since Rex passed. Fingers counted buttons on Robert's mothballed sweater until the realtor's payment confirmation buzzed. While tracing sugar frost ferns on the window pane, the $15,000 transfer receipt glowed. Vermont drafts seeped through warped frames, curling even young Robert's photo under the gone maple. 18 hours remained till her Greyhound departure. Susan unscrewed the last ball jar of apricot jam put up the morning Robert stopped reaching for high shelves. She spooned syrupy grief straight from the jar, watching sunlight expose basement boxes of unread letters through floor vents. Susan wiped dust from the photo frame, its glass still trapping a rose petal from their silver anniversary. The cardboard box at her feet sat half-filled with kitchen relics, egg beaters with twisted wires, a rolling pin split down the middle, silicone star-shaped cupcake molds Robert had sneeringly called anti-science. Each item wore a shroud of yellowed recipe clippings, newsprint ink bleeding into old grease stains. The refrigerator hummed its farewell aria, hollow except for a crusted jar of mustard powder on the door. A knock shattered the silence. Cooking magazines from 1998 slipped from her arms, the glossy Black Forest cake cover flipping mid-air like a dive into memory. Her pulse matched the leaky faucet's rhythm. 3 quick beats, pause, 2 more. Jacob would have pounded with his fist. Carla would have rung the bell. Strangers had stopped coming at dawn weeks ago. "Mrs. Miller?" The voice through the door crackled like a damaged wind chime. "Pharma Plus delivery." Susan froze, pearl-handled butter knife in hand. She hadn't ordered meds. Her antidepressants had run out 2 days prior, replaced instead by 3 packs of yeast and a sack of brown sugar in her Walmart cart. Vanilla extract from an open packet mingled with her sour, nervous sweat. She opened the door on its chain to find a girl in a pink uniform clutching a brown parcel tied like perfume sampler. To the left lay the shattered remains of a ceramic planter, yesterday's battlefield with the neighbor over property lines. "This was left at our store a month ago," the courier grinned, revealing impacted wisdom teeth. "With a letter. System glitch delayed it." The bag weighed heavy as a cast-iron skillet. Susan's fingers brushed cold glass, a bottle, before finding the envelope labeled, "For my Susie," in handwriting she'd stopped trusting after Jacob's forged checks. The courier descended the porch steps, humming a Tylenol jingle. Susan leaned against the door, sliding down the slope of wood Robert had always said invited drafts. The envelope smelled of lavender and something clinical, antiseptic maybe for wounds no one tended anymore. Robert's Swiss Army knife, engraved "To Culinary Victory," sliced the seal. The letter read like a disaster recipe. "Susie, if you're reading this, my pride outran my fear. Dr. Bailey found cancer moths in my lungs. Those damn Marlboros stole 5 extra years. Let Carla hug you often. Ignore her sharp tongue. Pay the mortgage with the visa under my desk. Knew you'd snoop there after a month. Lawyer has the rest. Loved only your pies and that laugh echoing off our porch when we..." Ink bled into a blue puddle mid-sentence. Susan pressed the paper to her lips. Flavorless proof it was real. Robert's plaid shirt in the hall closet billowed like a ghost struggling free. Which terrified more? This note or the 3 legal envelopes from Hartman and Sons that spilled out? Her Nokia buzzed on the countertop. Bank alert. $45,000 transfer reversed. Jacob had hit rock bottom again. 37 missed calls from Carla lit the screen. Today was clearly family tradition day. The visa waited where Robert kept unfinished shed blueprints under his desk, a charred corner still reeking of Aramis cologne and regrets. A $75,000 credit limit hung like the sword of Damocles he'd papered over with life insurance. "Foolish man," Susan muttered, tucking the card into her suitcase's hidden pocket. "Thought your money could save me? It'll burn me up like day-old candles." The delivered bottle proved to be 20-year scotch, the same brand Jacob begged for at 17. She kicked it under the sink where it hissed angrily. Seed packets rained soil on polyurethaned floors Robert had waxed daily, even during chemo. A dresser drawer vomited letters tied with wedding gown ribbon. Faded ink haunted the pages. The top envelope bore a date 1 month before Robert's death, matched to their Columbus, Ohio tulip garden trip where he'd smiled thinly all day. "Apply growth formula only with gloves. Water try daily. Soil temp above." Susan crumpled the rogue gardening note among love letters. Diagrams of apple trees carved with S&R shook in her hands. A cold, hollow land survey revealed acreage she'd already purchased blind. An engine growled in the driveway. Jacob's rusted Silverado crushed Robert's rose bushes like a tank. Susan stuffed documents into a world's best grandma backpack and fled toward the back door. Her jeans pocket bulged with a torn, cold, hollow postcard from their honeymoon, a roadmap to discarded leaps of faith. The Vermont-bound Greyhound departed in 40 minutes. Her suitcase trailed cilantro seeds and cinnamon bark. Behind her, Jacob's boots cracked the foyer's silence. "Mom, where's the damn money?" His voice shattered the nursery where a Cloud Mobile still turned. "They said you're draining our savings." Hour hovered like a knife over pie crust. Susan pressed against the laundry room's tide-scented darkness, watching through slats as Jacob kicked her wedding dress box. Beads scattered like tears unshed at the funeral. "In the flower jar," she surprised herself by answering. "Tell Carla to bake her own family hell." Jacob roared, toppling the microwave. The crash revealed hidden photos of granddaughter Emily, unseen since refusing to fund Carla's Peloton. Susan swallowed bitterness, creeping toward the back door's familiar squeak. She ran through Robert's pumpkin patch, rotted gourds collapsing under early snow. Arthritic knees screamed, but her legs remembered the escape route, the same path she'd taken at 16 from her drunk father. The backpack thumped. World's best, best, best. The Greyhound idled beneath a faded New Start billboard that once hawked lottery tickets. Susan heaved her suitcase aboard, leaving a palm print on dusty cargo glass. Her window seat smelled of Lysol and spilled Dunkin'. A recipe book fell open to Invisible Pie, dessert for hiding flaws. As the bus lurched forward, she glimpsed Jacob staggering across the parking lot, bottle in hand. His shout died beneath engine growl, but his lips formed "Mom" as she clutched Robert's letters. On the first bend, she smoothed his wrinkled orchard notes. The cold hollow map showed apple plots labeled Plan B. 2 hours north, snowfall swallowed the highway. The driver played Dolly Parton's Jolene. Susan whisper-sang Psalm 23 instead, spotting a familiar law firm's watermark on the land deed, one Robert had despised. Snowflakes traced the lines of blueprints, sketching new prisons. She unpacked the last pie, charred apple, wrapped in Robert's obituary. Crumbs rained on Plan B envelopes as she bit into crust. A baked-in eggshell fragment crunched, her edible penance. The bus hit a pothole. The letter slid onto the seat of a retired detective with eyes too keen for small talk. "Fine aroma," he remarked, lifting the deed. His finger brushed Cold Hollow's boundary line. Buying land or burying baggage? Susan snatched it back, leaving him a map fragment stained with Robert's final blood drop, where his heart had stopped twice. First from love, then mortality. Susan gripped the bus's grab rail as wheels hit gravel. Cold Hollow's access road looked like claw marks raked across the earth's skin. The snow line stopped short here, leaving gnarled apple tree roots exposed like arthritic fingers. The detective from seat 12D, he'd introduced himself as Morton, followed her to the exit, his gaze lingering on the map-stuffed envelope she'd jammed into her Levi's. "Granddad planted winter bananas here," he said, adjusting his worn John Deere cap. "Said cold-weather apples grow tougher. More to hide." Morton's chuckle dissolved into diesel fumes as Susan dragged her Samsonite toward the leaning tool shed from the deed. Blackberry thorns snagged her flannel sleeves, leaving barbed wire tattoos on her forearms. The shed door screamed open, revealing a Vietnam War-era potbelly stove with paint peeling like sunburnt skin. First night she slept on Pillsbury flour sacks wrapped in a Crisco-stained dish towel. The fully furnished home the realtor promised turned out to be cinder blocks under a weather-worn "coming soon" sign. By dawn, moths had eaten continents into her LL Bean sweater, but mint tea sweetened with wild hive honey tasted like possibility. Day 3 revealed the Abe Lincoln apple tree Robert had sketched in his blueprints, its trunk twisted like it tried escaping its own roots. Under sagging limbs fuzzy with rot, her shovel struck metal 6 inches down. The Folgers can leaked rust between her numb fingers. Tossing her mitten aside, Susan yanked the apartment key from her neck chain to pry it open. Letters swam in Ziploc bags, 12 envelopes with stamps from Reagan to Obama years. The 2007 entry began. "Dear Lily, Susan's arthritis flared again today. Winter light bled through onion skin paper. She collapsed onto frozen earth, cold seeping through triple-layer wool socks. Recognized her husband's hurried script, same slant as the prescription slips he'd sign nightly. Each letter addressed to Lillian Gray, nurse at Hillcrest Hospice where Robert spent that final pneumonia season. He called her Aunt Lil when I asked about the cigarette burn on his wrist. Her breath smoked the confession. Letter 5 described Lillian teaching him hot toddies to warm Susan's bones after library shifts. The 10th mentioned daily hospice garden walks where she'd accidentally brush fingers passing his Maxwell house. Snowflakes melted on ink. Final letter dated 3 days before his coronary. Can't stomach Susan's tears when she found your scarf in my Carhartt. Our garden became her prison, me just the gardener watering sin. If time allows, I'll plant where we... Fragments blurred. Susan crushed stationery in her fist. Wasp-riddled paper cutting crescents into flesh. A jagged laugh escaped, the kind that shatters picture windows. She imagined Robert penning this at their dinette where the cuckoo clock ticked toward betrayal. The bakery's construction began furious. She nailed boards barehanded, knuckles splintering with each hammer swing, cursed not at Lillian, but decades of lies masquerading as devotion. By dusk, the frame rose like whale bones on Nantucket shore. Morton appeared at twilight with wild turkey in a Hudson's Bay blanket. She spotted him by the sea buckthorn while stitching her palm with baker's twine. Hit the family jackpot, eh? He toe-kicked the Folgers can toward their bonfire, voice casual as a crossword clue. Susan fed letter 1 to flames. Fire licked Aunt Lil's confession into ash moths. My husband, she paused, tongue tasting bourbon and burnt lies. Tended death's victory garden. Morton passed the bottle. His fingertips, shockingly smooth for a man who worked land, grazed her wind-burned wrist. Grandpop stashed rum runners here in the 60s. Glued fragments with pine pitch, said grief's hell of a solvent. His words got lost in crackling cedar. Susan drained the whiskey, feeling shame's shackles dissolve. When Morton left his smoke and mint-scented blanket, she found a Buick side mirror in the lumber pile. The reflection showed her, salt and pepper hair, skin leathered by decades, hands clutching evidence. Becoming her, she thought, watching Lillian's features emerge in her jawline. Midnight flour sack sorting revealed a waterlogged composition book, payback recipes embossed on cover. Inside, garden trap schematics with Robert's notes, reduced strychnine dose for Susan's rabbits, new cursive in margins, loopy, feminine, remove lilacs, they testify. Dawn caught her deciphering 1999 journal entries, his suspicions about tainted meds, her fear of special spices in his Folgers. Apple branches knocked the bakery's unfinished window, demanding confession. Susan rummaged moving boxes until finding the sodium thiosulfate vial behind Del Monte peaches. Engine growls made her stash letters under roofing nails. In the doorway stood Carla clutching fake Louis Vuitton luggage, the monogram peeling under moonlight. "Mom, you pawned Grandpa's pocket watch." Receipts snowed from her Michael Kors knockoff. Susan lifted the auction slip. Lot 2176, 1890, Waltham, sold, $12,300. They didn't tick, Carly. They counted down to your college tuition tantrums. Her voice held steady against her daughter's Sephora shellacked cracks. Carla gasped at the Lillian photo slipped from the journal. White-coated woman hugging Robert under Bartlett pear blooms. "Dad, and who's that?" Her Valley Girl pitch returned. Susan tossed the snapshot into the stove. Flames leapt onto Carla's sleeve, branding faux leather. "Death's little helper." She smothered the ember, watching her daughter retreat. "Run back to Jacob. All that'll remain of me, here's chimney smoke." Post-Carla silence filled with construction clamor. By headlamp, Susan studied Robert's draft letters. Her own marginalia surfaced on backs, scone recipes with double vanilla. One envelope trapped his Old Spice and Lillian's Jean Naté. The property ledger tucked beneath journals revealed lists, dates, payments, initials. Robert sold ditchweed as oregano across 5 counties. Final entry pre-death. Lil found Canadian buyer. Need to plow under evidence. Susan marched to the apple tree, shovel biting roots with 10 years pent-up theater. 3 feet down, steel hit ceramic. Air 01 Tupperware urn labeled LG in Sharpie sun-faded to scar tissue pink. Neighbor's rooster crowed as she blended Lillian's remains with gold medal flour, secret ingredient for reconciliation pie. Dough bubbled sins, each pop sounding like truth. First customer arrived at noon, weathered farmer with bloodhound eyes. For the Mrs. Cancer, he slapped a tenner down. She served him ash-sprinkled pie scraped from 98's letter. "Bitter makes sweet stick," she whispered as he chewed. The farmer wept openly. Susan stabbed crust with a fork, releasing steam that reeked of fear and Cody musk. On the bakery wall, the cold hollow survey map curled from its nail, marking where tomorrow's shovel would strike bone. Morton showed up every dawn with a basket of eggs, pretending not to notice the ash smudges on the windowsill. His work boots tracked mud that Susan camouflaged with flour, creating Rorschach patterns across the linoleum. On the 5th morning, he brought a cast-iron skillet with a spiral-carved handle. "Great-granddad's heirloom," he said, cracking an egg against the stove edge. The yolk spread like rust stains from those letters she'd found. "They say this pan-fried meat for Underground Railroad runners. Stories cling to iron, same as bacon grease." Susan stirred her dough laced with yesterday's pinch of funeral urn ashes. Her nails still showed crescent moons of garden soil even Dawn dish soap couldn't touch. "Doesn't that history give you the heebie-jeebies? Fire purges everything." He dragged his thumb across the stove's glowing edge without flinching. "Your husband learned that lesson too late." The wooden spoon clattered. Morton retrieved it, wiping it slow on his Carhartts. His eyes, the color of oversteeped Lipton, narrowed. "Lily Gray was my 3rd cousin, twice removed. Told me bedtime stories about fairies who sewed liars' lips shut with holly thorns. He grabbed the sugar canister, pouring white granules onto his calloused palm. When the John Deere crushed her, Robert bought the family farm for pocket change. Sugar hissed against hot iron, caramelizing. Susan suddenly recognized why Morton's capital M's looked familiar. They mirrored Lily's sweeping script in those love letters to the county agricultural board. "You burned her correspondence," she said, watching molten gold bubble. Before handing Robert the deed, his chuckle mixed with the citrus tang of lemon juice hitting caramel. The scent merged with his Barbasol aftershave, sharp as rubbing alcohol. 20 years later, she's still everywhere, in the topsoil, the termite-eaten barn beams, even your daughter's chin dimple. He left behind the skillet and a silence thicker than biscuit dough. Susan fired up her ancient Dell laptop traded for 3 peach pies at the church bake sale. The cursor blinked until she typed, "Recipe Year 47, saltwater taffy tears. Ingredients, 2 cups of family secrets, 1 tablespoon of generational trauma. Wi-Fi cut out as a rusted F-150 crunched gravel outside. A woman in a pheasant feather cloche hat dumped a burlap sack of black walnuts on the porch. "Heard you pay in pastry for tall tales," she rasped, lips cracked like Michigan cherry bark. "My Bill drank himself blue, drowned in Lake Huron, then started haunting our outhouse. Good enough opener?" Susan offered a foil-wrapped pear tart. "Complimentary sample." The woman broke off a corner with grubby fingers, mirroring Carla at 6 years old demolishing gingerbread houses. "Hints of wood ash," she noted, chewing like a detective solving mysteries. "Just like Grandma's rum cake. She smoked backwoods cigars till 93. Alone again, Susan shelled walnuts. Among the husks lay a mummified rabbit's foot, Robert's lucky charm from their Vegas honeymoon. She tossed it into the flames, watching hairs crisp into black teardrops. The flash of blue fire? Probably Lily's ashes nesting in the chimney flue. Frost etched crystal ferns on window panes that night. Susan rummaged through the tool drawer for her pie crimper when flour-dusted rags revealed a 1995 stamped envelope. Inside, Robert and Lily, standing before a greenhouse lush with star-shaped leaves, and a young Morton, Carla's dimple already carved into his chin. The picture frame shattered against her Sunrise Bakery sign before she realized she'd thrown it. Shards pervertilis the cursive S into a paragraph symbol, like some unspoken clause in the crazy family contract. By 2 a.m., Susan's shovel clanged against a metal lockbox labeled Biohazard, County Agricultural Extension. Inside, seed packets marked Lilium SG5. Notebooks with Robert's Parkinson's scrawl detailing hemp crossed with wild sage. Growth charts showed jagged peaks beside entries like test subject LG, reduced anxiety, but reported night terrors and visions. A twig snap made her drop the flashlight. Morton stood framed in the root cellar entrance, Remington 700's serpent headstock gleaming. "Bedtime," he said, though the barrel pointed at the lockbox. Susan covered the journal with Lily's embroidered dish towel. "Your aunt wasn't just another dirt farmer. She was his lab rat." The rifle wavered. His laugh sounded like a screen door in a hurricane. "Lily aimed to be Beethoven of pesticides, ended up composing requiems for her own damn mind." He stepped closer, boots crunching spent Marlboros. Robert tried pulling the plug. His final experiment, her tossed specimen vial shattered against walnut stalk, spilling seeds smelling of damp hay. "That last trial killed them both. You just bought the poisoned well." His lunge defied his AARP membership. Cold steel pressed beneath her rib cage as he scooped seeds into a woolen mitten. "Buyers come tomorrow. You'll take a tragic tumble down the cellar stairs. Hazard of solitary living." Dawn found Susan piecing together journal pages with Aunt Jemima syrup. Morning light revealed margins where Lily's LG doodles formed musical notes, the same ones from Carla's middle school recorder recitals. First customer, a pink-haired girl with an urn tattoo. "My boyfriend OD'd on bad Molly," she said, twirling a skull keychain. "He'd laugh his ass off at your grandma pastries." Susan served a gold-leafed pie still smoldering with Morton's files. Laughter makes the best tombstone, she said, watching the girl sink teeth into what used to be lab reports. Engine roar drowned the door chime. Through ice-frosted glass, Morton leaned against a green-thumbed delivery truck holding her shovel. She yanked the door open, December biting through flannel. Lose your lab rats? Morton turned slower than a 90s dial-up connection. Your daughter sent reinforcements. He jerked his thumb at the cab. Her son Jacob slumped like a detoxing scarecrow. Jacob stumbled out, paint-stained fingers gripping the door, same fingers that once sold her TV for dime bags. Ma, they're scamming you. Susan grabbed the rolling pin before realizing these weren't cartel thugs, just ghosts wearing familiar skin. Your stoner buddies already stole my inheritance. Morton chuckled, racking the Remington. Family reunion, straight out a little house on the prairie. Jacob lurched forward, dropping a ziplock of white powder. He made me. Lily was... The gunshot popped like a soda can crushing. Jacob collapsed, gulping frost-bitten air. Susan pressed her palm against the wound, oozing something between orange peel and motor oil. Now the loose ends get buried with you, Morton's voice faded with retreating tire tracks. Ice patterns mirrored the timeline she'd failed to erase. Jacob's blood marbled the leftover pear tart. Susan broke off a crust corner, shoved it between bluing lips. Swallow your medicine, kid. Tastes better than bullshit. His moan confirmed it. Old recipes needed new ingredients. Blood pulsed between her fingers in warm surges, like someone trying to resurrect the rhythm of long-forgotten lullabies. Jacob gasped for air, his pupils blown wide as 1972 bicentennial quarters from her collector's album. Susan pressed the bloodied apron against his wound, arthritic joints screaming in protest. "Where'd he keep you?" she demanded, digging through 30-year-old Red Cross CPR memories. "Storage units? Lab spaces? Spit it out, goddammit." Jacob coughed up a shard of blue glass. "Old. Greenhouse past the creek. The plants." His hand twitched northward like broken clockwork. Susan tore down the gingham curtain, winding it tight around her son's abdomen. Her hands remembered these motions, same way she'd bandaged scraped knees when that Lalique vase broke all those years ago. That same little girl, Carla, now hung over her like a sword via encrypted blog drafts and password-protected cloud storage. The frozen air stabbed her lungs as she heaved Jacob onto the flour trolley. Wheels squeaked through snowdrifts to the rhythm of her hissed threat. "Die on me, and I'll bake your ashes into Duncan Hines muffins." Her son wheezed, talon fingers clawing at the wooden rails. The creek trail vanished under 2 feet of fresh powder. Susan pushed uphill, roots snagging her boots like underground cables. The greenhouse materialized suddenly, a glass tomb draped in snow, glowing inside like some failed X-ray resurrection. The door yielded on the third kick. The stench hit first, rotting strawberries marinated in nail polish remover. Jacob groaned toward specimen jars where blooms floated like pickled cerebellums. "Where's the antidote?" Susan shook him, her palms burning through his feverish shirt. "Talk or I'll tuck you in permanent with a memory foam pillow." "Safe," he gurgled. "Codes. Your..." His head lolled. Susan buried her face in the apron, breathing in copper and vanilla extract. Losing him here, surrounded by his father's mad science projects. No. She scrubbed snow across her face until tears froze. The safe hid behind photos of Lillian. Black and white shots of her posing with vine-choked necks like some botanical femme fatale. The keypad glittered with mold. Wedding date, error. Robert's birthday, red light. Last chance, the day Jacob stole $20 from her Walgreens tip jar for Marlboros. A green click. Inside lay a syringe of neon orange liquid and a moleskin notebook. Page 1 held Robert's chicken scratch. Real grief remedies aren't swallowed, they're digested. The injection made Jacob's body arc like a TV antenna. His skull cracked a seed shelf, sending purple grains scattering like beads from a broken rosary. Susan knelt in the debris, massaging life back into his hands until his pupils shrunk from dimes to pencil dots. Why? Her whisper mixed with chemical fumes. Why choose their madness over mine? Jacob's eyelids fluttered. You always gave me burnt cookie bottoms. He saved the buttercream roses. Wind moaned through glass panels, playing discordant funeral marches. Susan stood, counting silhouettes beyond the frost, too many for just Morton's crew. The inventory took minutes. Herbicide drums, journals marked LD50 in Sharpie, Lilium 3 vials. She pocketed 2 ampules and a matchbook stuffed with dried petals. Souvenirs or evidence? Dawn found Jacob conscious, his grip weaker than when he'd clutched her sleeve at Costco as a child. Dad knew about the tax fraud, wanted to burn it all. Susan leaned down, catching childhood remnants of Johnson's baby shampoo in his hair. Life's a better arsonist than Morton. She hefted an antifreeze drum, that sweet ethylene glycol stench as deceptive as Robert's marriage vows. After dousing the floors, she dragged Jacob into the cold. Blue flames birthed a jack-o'-lantern from hell. The blast shattered windows across a quarter-mile radius. Susan watched fire consume Lillian's legacy, wondering how many PTA moms her age had baked their husbands' secrets into Mrs. Smith's pie crusts. Firefighters arrived with Morton. He stood behind police tape, chewing a toothpick like this was Law and Order reruns night. Their eyes met. 2 crows in a snow globe. Cleanse with fire? He smirked as she passed, wrapped in an EMT blanket. Boy's ashes still cycling through your dryer vent. Susan paused. Carbon's essential for the immortality recipe. Thanks for supplying the base. Morton froze. First time in 20 years his eyes showed anything but contempt, fear, or respect. Jacob survived, held as accessory, but Susan brought courthouse pies daily. Cherry with a hydrocodone crust, she'd whisper through jail bars. 3 months later, Morton showed up at her doorstep. Instead of a rifle, he carried a cardboard box labeled Fragile with a Montreal postal stamp. His face had grown gaunt, eyes sunken so deep they looked like abandoned wells in a forgotten garden. From her, he dropped the box at Susan's feet. Lillian's last package. Canadian mail moves slower than earthworms. Susan picked up the box, feeling that familiar weight, like a bag of flour or an urn of ashes. Something rattled inside, as if broken glass was trying to come back to life. Why bring this to me, she asked, but Morton was already turning toward his pickup. Because you're the only one who understands recipes for the dead, he called over his shoulder, and because she specifically asked for it to go to Robert's widow. The truck disappeared over the hill, leaving only tire tracks in the melting snow. Susan carried the box into the bakery, where tomorrow's batch of reconciliation pies was already rising, her signature dish that had become legend among widows in 3 neighboring counties. Inside the box lay 37 vials of seeds, each labeled in Lillian's handwriting. Memory cornflower, forget-me-not poppy, truth chamomile. At the bottom, a thick leather-bound notebook and a letter sealed with red wax. Dear inheritor of my grief, if you're reading this, Robert is dead and you've found our secrets. Don't judge him harshly. He tried to save me from my own madness by slipping antidepressants into my tea. Morton will tell you about the tractor accident, but the truth is, I laid myself under those wheels. The seeds in this box are my final work. Each variety bred for a specific kind of pain. Use them in your baking for those seeking not forgetting, but understanding of their grief. Dosages are in the notebook. P.S. Morton doesn't know, but he's my son. Robert wasn't the only one keeping secrets. Forever yours in the craft of comfort, Lillian Gray. Susan set the letter down with trembling hands. The notebook proved to be a true encyclopedia of botanical therapy. Hundreds of recipes where flour mixed with dried petals and sugar was replaced with root extracts. Each page contained precise dosages, warnings, stories of people Lillian had healed. Recipe number 12, Bread of Release. For those who cannot forgive themselves for the last words spoken to the deceased. 2 cups, coarse ground flour, 1 TSP memory cornflower seeds, pinch of ash from a burned letter of blame, knead until tears stop falling into the dough. Susan smiled for the first time in months. This was what her bakery had been missing, not just a way to digest grief, but a method to transform it into something nourishing. Her first customer for the new recipe was Edna Clements, a 78-year-old widow who'd lost her husband to COVID. She brought a photo of their last argument and asked for something for the guilt. Susan baked her rolls with cornflower seeds and honey. Edna ate slowly, thoughtfully, and when she finished the last crumb, her face brightened. For the first time in a year, I remembered not his anger, but how he used to laugh at my attempts to cook, she whispered. Thank you. Word of the new recipes spread faster than wildfire in dry brush. By month's end, lines of widows, divorced women, and grieving mothers stretched outside the bakery. Each brought their story, and Susan crafted individual recipes. Jacob was released on bail after 4 months. He came to her gaunt, with new lines around his eyes, but sober for the first time in a decade. Mom, he said, stopping at the threshold. I brought this. In his hands lay a jar labeled forgiveness seeds, a gift from a cellmate whose wife had died in an accident he'd caused. Susan hugged her son, feeling the tension leave his shoulders. You know what? Let's bake bread together, like old times. They worked in silence, their hands meeting in the same bowl, measuring flour and love in equal proportions. Jacob no longer trembled, and Susan no longer counted each spoonful of sugar as if it were her last. When the bread rose in the oven, filling the bakery with the scent of new beginnings, Susan pulled out the final letter from Lillian's box, addressed not to her, but to future bakers of comfort. Remember, grief is the yeast of the soul. It lifts us not to make us higher than others, but so we can feed those hungry for understanding. Every pie baked with love for the living and respect for the dead is a small miracle of resurrection. Don't let pain burn in vain. Turn it into bread. Susan hung this letter above the oven, next to Robert's photograph. In the picture, he was smiling, holding her first successful pie, the very one she'd baked the day they met 40 years ago. Now she knew. Love doesn't disappear with death. It just changes its recipe. Outside the window, the apple trees Robert had planted bloomed. Their petals fell on fresh graves in the memory garden Susan had created beside the bakery. Here rested not bodies, but stories, each marked with a small stone engraved with a recipe for happiness. Morton never came back. People said he'd moved to Canada, to Lillian's relatives. But sometimes at night, Susan found baskets of rare seeds by her door with a note. From a son who finally understood his mother. Jacob stayed in Cold Hollow, helping in the bakery and studying botany from Lillian's notebooks. Carla visited every Christmas, bringing granddaughter Emily, who was learning to bake, cookies for sad people. And Susan continued kneading dough, mixing flour with memory, salt with tears, sugar with hope. Her Baking Widow blog featured a new section, Recipes for Those Who Remain. The final entry read, The ingredients for happiness can't be bought at the store. They can only be grown in the field of your own grief, watered with tears of gratitude and baked in the oven of acceptance. Come to me, you who are weary with pain. I will feed you the bread of understanding. And they came, every day, carrying their stories like the most precious ingredients. And Susan baked and baked and baked, turning others' pain into shared bread of hope.